Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess with So Many Creations. In this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through my violet barrel bag. Look at this beautiful girl. I am obsessed. I don't even know if obsessed covers it. I think there needs to be a new word. I have been working on this pattern. I have had this idea in my head for over 3 years. That sounds insane, right? I understand. But I have gone back and forth. I have let other things get kind of in the way. Other patterns have been more important, other things going on in my life. And finally, I said, this is the year. Violet needs to be released to the world. And what was my hesitation? I really don't know. I think one of the small hesitations I had was that it's going to be a challenging bag. This is not going to be your simple tote bag. We're not doing box corners and easy things. But one thing that I love about this bag is that if you've made this style bag before, or if you've seen bags like this before, typically they're done one of two ways. The finishing is either with binding or it's a drop-in lining. This bag has none of it. Guys, this is a turnstile bag. There is no binding inside. There is no drop-in lining. You turn this bag through an opening and you're done. Look at that. No binding. Not an ounce of it. Now listen, I understand a lot of people like binding. It's just not my thing. And all of my patterns are birthed or turnstile bags. So I racked my brain for months and months, actually years. I'm not kidding when I say 3 years, trying to think of how I could make this awesome style in my awesome style. And I finally did it. I am always proud. I'm always excited when new patterns come out, but this one really warms my heart because I have been waiting for it for so long. I have gotten amazing feedback from my testers, from you, from showing you little previews and snippets of it pretty much since this summer. I don't know when you're watching this video, but it's November of 2024. I started finally showing you this bag probably around, I think it was like June. And it was 3 years before that I started sewing these at a retreat and then just kept putting them aside. Well, I'm not putting her in the corner anymore. It is time. So one of the things I really love about this bag, aside from the fact that it's a turnstile bag, is that this is going to give you a little bit of a challenge. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Don't run away from this video. This is going to show you that you can do more complex things. We don't need to make tote bags with box corners for the rest of our life. We can, we absolutely can. They're great palette cleansers, but give yourself a little bit of a challenge. Try something different. This bag is going to show you how to use connectors. We're going to talk about this double D-ring hardware. We're going to do a double zipper on the top with tabs. The sides have these great pockets. They're really deep too. Really nice size pockets to put your phone or your keys. I even got a little bit into doing some strap end hardware. It's not in the pattern, but I just included it because I thought it looked really awesome. There's an adjustable handle. Inside is your standard divided pockets and zippered pockets. But once you get all those pieces together, I think the assembly is pretty cool. It's going to kind of, again, it's going to challenge you. It's going to show you that you can do things that are not super simple. You are capable and smart and you can do this. I have made, I think 6 or 7 of these bags in the past few months. I still want to keep making more because I just love them. This is the one I'm going to show you in today's video. We'll talk about where to put a handmade tag. We'll talk about top stitching. I'm going to give you all the tips I have on making these tabs and making them look awesome. This one right here probably is not even mine by the time you're watching this video because my mother has already claimed this one, and that makes me super excited. Who doesn't want someone in their life to be that excited about what they made? So this one with the houndstooth, this one has a home already. I've made some really awesome ones using the EVL cork line. I'm going to show it to you in the video, so hang in there for just a minute. I am so excited. So go ahead and get your pattern. You can find it right here on the website. You can grab all your supplies. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll drop my email here just in case you need it. If you like videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. All right, let's go make an awesome bag together. So let's get started right on page 1 and go through our cutting list. I'm going to go through what I have and also touch base on if you are using cotton or canvas where you might want to have interfacing. None of my pieces for today's project have interfacing. Nothing in this bag is interfaced. I was able to do that because of the selection of my materials. So let's go through each of those. So our first 2 pieces are both A. These are going to be from the main print. I'm just going to call it print. Yours might be a solid, but it's going to be from like the houndstooth right here. So this is going to be the front and back of the bag. I'm using cork. I do not have any interfacing. If you are using a canvas or a cotton for this, I would highly recommend adding some medium weight interfacing to this. That's going to help you to get some nice structure to your bag. My next two pieces are B. These are going to be for the side panels. So when you're looking at the bag right here, that's going to be this piece where my D-ring tabs are secured. This is the pocket down here, which we haven't gotten to, but these are my Bs. Those are going to be trimmed with a template, and we will talk about templates as well. Again, with cotton or canvas, I would add interfacing to these. I have two pieces for C. C is going to be for the bottom of the outside pockets. There's one on each end. So those are going to be for right here. That's going to create our pocket. We're also going to have an accent that we will get to. For these, I would add interfacing as well for cotton. I have my two D pieces. These are my zipper tabs. So these are going to be for the ends of the zipper right here. These will be exposed at the end of the when you complete your bag. If you're using cotton for these, I would say you could probably skip the interfacing. They're not super important as far as structure, so it's not going to be a big deal. They're also very small pieces. And the last two pieces that I have from my main print are going to be E. These are going to be for the D-ring tabs. So these are going to be right here, the tabs that my long adjustable handle attached to. If you are using cotton for these, you are going to need to make them the way you would make a regular handle, which is going to be folded differently. I would say if you want to mix cotton in, maybe do it for your main pieces and things like this, as well as our accent, which we'll get to in just a second. I would probably stick to something non-fraying. If you really wanted to do these out of cotton, you could add a little bit of interfacing to the center, and you're going to have to cut them double the width because we'll have raw edges to hide. Cork does not require you to cover the raw edges. From my accent or my solid, I have my two F pieces. These are going to be for the bottom accent right here. Those will also be trimmed with a template. These are going to be raw edge, so I would not try to substitute cotton or anything that frays. These do not have any interfacing, and since all of the accent is going to be cut out of cork and recommended that you cut, I'm not going to keep saying that over and over. We're just going to skip the interfacing on these. So these are my F pieces. I also have here my G pieces. These are going to be for the top of the side pockets. So the side pockets actually are two color. There's the print on the bottom and the solid on the top. These are going to be the top of that. I have 4 strips right here for my handles. And let's just talk real quick about handles. If you've made any of my more recent bags, you know that I really like a tri-fold handle. I like a real sturdy handle. But because of the measurements and the requirements for the cork, instead of having you buy an additional piece and spend even more and have, more invested into your bag, I used what was in front of me, and I was able to get the short handles, which are going to be attached here, as well as my long adjustable handle. Now, if you are skipping the adjustable handle, you could make your short handles a little bit thicker. If you want to purchase extra cork and cut these wider so you can do a trifold, you can absolutely do that. Handles are very personal. I think bag making is, but in general, when it comes to handles, everyone kind of has a way that they like to do them. Some of my testers skipped the adjustable. Some of them made their handles into 2 color. They've kind of adapted different things. You can make this however you want. When I write a pattern with the cork requirements or fabric requirements, I try to make sure that you're not overbuying, especially when it comes to cork. So this, you were able to get 2 18 by 27s. That gave you your entire outside. But if you don't like this double fold or single fold, depends on who you ask. I call it a double fold because it's folded 2 times, but I guess that would be a single fold. A discussion for another day. If you don't like this style or technique for handles, you can always purchase extra cork. So I have 2 H's and 2 I's. They are cut exactly the same. 2 of these will become short handles. 2 of these will become 1 long adjustable handle. I've also gone ahead and cut my J tabs, and we are going to go over these as well as the hardware when we get there. This type of bag, you can substitute any type of hardware that you want. I wanted to do some cork tabs because I really like the double D-ring hardware that I'm going to be showing that I also talked about in the pattern. These are compatible with double D rings. They're also compatible with rectangle rings. any kind of hardware where you're going to be looping this through. If you're using a larger piece of hardware, like an icicle or a jewel, or there's so many out there and they have so many different names, the type of hardware that attaches directly to your bag and then your handle attaches to that, you don't need these. And you will have a little bit of each color or print of cork left over, and you can decide how you want to do these. On this one, as well as the rest of my samples, I matched the outside so that my hardware kind of stood out, but my tabs did not. For today, I decided, because I liked what one of my testers did, I decided to go with the accent. I think it's gonna look really nice, and if I really don't like it, I have an extra piece, I can recut them. So we will talk more in depth about the tabs as well as hardware when we get to that step. So for J, I have 4 pieces. I already cut them using the template in the pattern, and instead of cutting pieces like rectangles, I just took the template right to the cork and traced around it. For my lining pieces, I have chosen to use a water-resistant cotton. This does not have any interfacing, and I have chosen to do that for all of these pieces. Some of them, if you're using cotton, you would want to interface. So my first 2 pieces right here are going to be K. These are for the lining, and I have 2 of these. I would interface these if you are using regular cotton. You definitely want something a little bit sturdier. I also have L. These are going to be for the side panels, so they would actually go this way. These are going to be for the lining side panels, so these will be inside versus the cork ones that are outside. These don't have any pockets like the outside of the bag. I also have right here my 2 M pieces. These are going to be for the lining of the outside pockets. So these are technically lining fabric, but they will be on the outside. They're going to be this fabric right here. So it's not technically showing, but sort of, depending on how you look at your bag. Again, I've had people actually use this and make an accent on the top of their pocket. There's all sorts of things that you can do. Today, I'm just going to follow with the pattern. So you pretty much won't see this, but you can kind of peek a little bit into the pocket. I also have here, I think I have these out of order. Nope, I don't, sorry. I have here N. This is gonna be for my divided pocket. I usually fold this in half so I know what it is. This is gonna be for my inside divided pocket. And also inside is going to be a zippered pocket, and I have my 2 O pieces. I am doing them out of 2 squares instead of a tall rectangle because it was easier for fabric yardage, and I kind of like this technique. So now that I have all the pieces, let's talk about the hardware and the zippers, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about templates. Oh, and before I forget, I have 2 P's. These are my last 2 pieces. They were so tiny I almost forgot. These are going to be for the zipper tabs for the inside. For hardware and zippers, there's going to be a few optional pieces here as well as some that are going to be required, and I'll go through each of those. So our zippers, we're going to have 1 inside and 1 on the top. These are overcut. I have not trimmed them down yet. For the outside, you can use a single zipper pull. That is totally fine. I like the look of a double pull, so I'm going to use these really pretty rose pulls that I got from moremeknow.com. That's also where I got my lining fabric from. I'm going to use those on the outside, and I'm just going to use a single donut pull for the inside. That's for my zippered pocket. I also have my double D-rings. That's what I meant when I said double D-rings. They're a D-ring that's kind of combined together. So half of this will be attached to the tab and sewn to the bag, and up here is where my handle is going to be attached. If you don't have this type of hardware, you can also sub a standard rectangle ring. You can also use any type of hardware that you desire. That is totally up to you. This is the style that's in the pattern and what I'm going to be going over in today's tutorial. When I add these handles on, I'm also going to add on these optional strap ends. This is something that you do not need. I just think it adds a nice little touch. You can see on this one right here, I've added those onto the back. So when I hold my handle up, I have these nice little tabs. Again, you do not need those. You also can skip the rivets if you want. I'm going to use rivets to hold my handles in place. I'm also going to use some rivets in other places. Those can all be substituted with stitching if you don't want to add rivets or don't have any rivets. So rivets are optional, but I think they're quite useful. These strap ends, again, totally optional. These screw on, and I do have the bag of screws as well. So I have those as another optional piece. Also optional is a handmade tag. I'm going to add that on, and I'll show you a nice place where you can add that. If you are doing the adjustable removable handle, you're going to need 2 swivel hooks, 2 D-rings, and a slide. If you have chosen not to do the adjustable handle, you can omit those pieces. You can make this simple or you can make this kind of hardware heavy. It really depends on the style that you're going for. So those are all of the hardware pieces that I have. Now let's talk about our basic supplies that we're also going to need, as well as some really helpful tools and templates. So when it comes to the supplies that you're going to need for your bag, you'll want to grab all of your basic sewing supplies. I did not gather everything here, but I have my scissors, my rotary cutter. Of course, I have a seam ripper. I did grab some marking tools. All of my cork is light colored on the back, so I'm just going to use a heat erasable pen. This will also be helpful when we get to our tabs later on. I have my lighter, which I always use to burn my any fraying that I have on the back from the cork backing, but I also use this to remove this pen. Again, that's going to be important in a later step. I did grab a small screwdriver since I am using strap ends, and I have right here my stapler. This is going to be a very important tool, I feel, for making this bag. I will give you some tips and tricks if you don't have a stapler that will make it easier when you get to your side panels. Because the side panels are curved and because of the techniques that we're using, I find that this gives me my absolute best results. You can use clips, you can use tape even, you can do some extra stitching. There's different things that we can do that we will discuss. But for me, this tool right here is worth its weight in gold. I could not be happier that I have it. So everyone kind of has a different opinion when it comes to the staplers. Different bag makers like different brands. What I would recommend is a stapler that is kind of like this one, where it's a handheld instead of the desktop kind where you're pushing down. This allows you to get really close. Plus the staples themselves are very, very small. So technically I should be removing them from the bag. I'm acknowledging that, but a lot of times I don't, just because I'm lazy. I'm not gonna lie. But I do have a staple remover. I should definitely be doing that. But they're so tiny that they don't feel like, to me, that they're going to cause any problems. I may regret that and make a video later on where I tell you not to. So do as I say, not as I do. Take your staples out when you're done using them. But I'll show you when we get to that step how I use this. This one right here, because I know you're going to ask, is the Tim Holtz Tiny Attacher. So that is the name of the staple. The stapler. I bought mine online. You can sometimes get these at craft stores. I would also recommend when you buy this to get yourself a few boxes of refills, because you're going to use more staples than you realize. And they're so incredibly small. Let me show you. That's the staple right there. They're about 1/4 inch. They're very fine, but they do such an amazing job, and I find it to be a very helpful tool that I'm kind of sad I didn't have before, and I definitely think I will use in more of my bag making. So that is kind of a special tool. If you don't have one, you can make this without it, but this will definitely help you. So speaking of other tools that you don't need but can make this bag without, we're also going to talk about templates. So in the back of your pattern, I'm going to show you a few things here. In the back of your pattern, you do have full-size templates. You have your tab, and these have been updated. The ones I might use in the video that I've already cut don't have this right here. One of my testers had requested it, and I thought it was very clever. This one says what piece it's being used on, so does the tab. For the bottom here, your accent, you're going to be able to tape those together so that you have a full template. It's going to look like this one right here. Don't worry about the markings, we're not there yet. You'll see that mine does not have that it's for piece F because it has been updated since I cut this, but I didn't want to cut another one. You also have a 1-inch test square, and I cannot emphasize enough on this pattern, especially, even above any other pattern. Check that when you're printing. If these templates are off, especially the template that's going to be doing your side panel, you can ruin your cork and not have enough. It generally will print too small. Too small, we can't really fix. So double check your measurements. Make sure that when you put this on your B and L pieces that it's pretty snug. You don't have a lot of overage. You definitely don't want to make a mistake on these just because you don't want to ruin your precious expensive cork. So you are going to have all of these in the pattern. There's also some tab placement that's going to be really helpful. But what I also have, and again, not necessary, but just wanted to show you, is I have a template set for the violet bag. And what that's going to come with is a 3-piece set. You are going to get, for template number 2, a half template. This is going to tell you to place it on fold. It's just too large of a template for me to make out of one piece of acrylic. It would definitely get broken in shipping. So you have your half template right here, which I'm going to use today. You also have your side panel. This is the same size as what's in the pattern. It has tab placement, and it has these little holes right here where you can put your pen to make marks and help you line up your tab. It's also going to come with the J tab right here. This makes it really easy to mark around, and you can also cut with these. You can use your rotary cutter. Now, this one's kind of on the small side, so even a tiny rotary cutter can be tight, but what I like to do is get my straight edges started after I've marked everything, and then I just use my scissors for a little bit. I find that my tabs come out cleaner. If you do not want to invest in that, again, you have the templates in the pattern. I also have option number 2. If you just like this style and you want to do some tabs and just the tabs, you can buy the 4-piece tab set. And that's going to give you 4 different style options, 4 different shapes. So for the video, I'm going to be using the one that's in the pattern, but I have used all of these in my samples, and you'll see those in some of the pictures in this video. I love that you have some different options right here. I will show you how to use this type of tab because they do look kind of funny. Why does this look like a guitar? I will explain that when we get there. I have a 4-piece option, and I also have a 3-piece option. If you purchase the violet, you don't need to get 2 of these. So everything is on my website, which I will link again for you down here. And you can also email me if you have questions. I'm going to be using these and also referring to the paper templates. Again, optional, but helpful, especially if you're making more than one. Last but not least, let's talk about our thread choices and our feet. I have here some OptiPop. This is from Wawac, however you like to pronounce it. This is a Tex 45. I'm going to be using this on my Janome HD9. So my machine can take a little bit heavier thread, but I kind of like this medium weight. If you're using a domestic, a Tex 35 will work nicely for you, or a 40 weight. This is a bonded polyester thread. I just went neutral because I didn't really want my thread to stand out. As far as feet are concerned, I always use my compensating feet. I have the 1/8 inch right here, which I'll do for a lot of top stitching and edge sewing. I also have a 1/4 inch. It's already on my machine. And one of the other feet that I find really important for this is my cording foot. I like this for when I'm sewing my tabs because sometimes it can be really tricky to get along this top edge here and to get a nice straight edge or seam top stitching. I'm finding the words right along here. So I like to use my cording foot for that. If you're using your domestic, you're definitely going to want a 1/4 inch foot, something to do some 1/8 inch or some nice tight top stitching, and a cording or a zipper foot, something narrow that you can use for your pieces there. Okay. I also have clips. I always have clips. What else have I forgotten? Hopefully nothing. I think that's everything. I think we are finally ready to get into making this bag. All right, so let's go right to step 1. Let me clear up this space and let's start sewing. Step 1 of your pattern is going to be discussing fusing for any pieces that need interfacing. That is not something that I'm going to go over today since we did already discuss it during the cutting and when we went through all of our pieces. Because I'm using cork outside and water resistant canvas inside, I am not interfacing anything. The interfacing is just going to apply to cotton if you're using that for your main lining pieces, or if you're using cotton or canvas, a lightweight canvas for the outside. Now that we've kind of gone over step 1, let's jump right into step 2, which is trimming with our templates. So for each of these, I have also grabbed the acrylic templates as well as the paper copies that are in the pattern. We already did our J tabs right here, so I'm not going to go over those again. We've got those all trimmed and ready to go. That is discussed in the beginning of the pattern because it does suggest that you use your template to do your trimming from your scraps. As far as your template 1, this is going to be for your side panel. So you're going to have 2 linings, which are L, and 2 outsides, which are B. Those are going to be for the actual side that creates the barrel shape of this bag. If you use either template, you're just going to place that right on top of your fabric or your cork, and your template should fit pretty snugly. There's not a lot of wiggle room around this, and that means that you have cut everything correctly. Double check your 1 inch test square to make sure that this is not incorrect. If this is too small, you're going to have to make a lot of adjustments in order to make your bag fit at the end. And I do not have those measurements because unfortunately, if a printer decides to do that on you, I don't really know how to adjust it for you. But what that's going to affect is your main pieces. So just check to make sure that this fits pretty snug and that you also have checked your 1-inch test square. I'm going to trim my L pieces right here. I've already gone ahead and done my side panels for the outside out of cork. One other note, if you're using a directional fabric of any kind, make sure the skinnier part, the narrow part, is your top. So if you have a tree or an animal or anything that needs to be upright, make sure that this is your top. I did not do any of the markings for the tab placement since we're not there yet. And I will need this template again in a later step. I believe step 4. When we get there, we'll grab it again. So I'm done for now, but I'm going to keep it close by. I'm just going to move these right out of my way. That's all I needed to do with those. For template number 2, in the pattern, you're going to have a left and a right, and you're going to cut those out and tape them together. There is a tape line, and it will show you how to cut that or how to tape that. This should be the same width as your piece, as your F. So this should be the same width and relatively the same height. Sometimes cutting paper, it gets a little bit oddly trimmed. Something to remember with this one as well. First of all, directional. If you have anything directional, this is going to be your top where that scoop is cut. But also, this is not going to line up on the front and back of the bag. And what I mean by that is when you look at the bag right here on this side versus this side, there's a pocket in between. There's nothing that's lining that up. So if for any reason your curves are not identical or something has gone a little bit astray and maybe you've over trimmed a little bit just because you made an error, it's not the end of the world. The main thing to remember is that we need this to be the same width as our F piece. And also when you do your trimming, sometimes whether you're using acrylic or paper, it will shift a little bit. You might not get really sharp points. This is going to go into a seam allowance later, so it's not a super big deal. This raw edge will be shown, so we'll want to make this as clean as we possibly can. If you are trimming your piece using the acrylic template, you can do it one of 2 ways. I do tell you to place that on the fold, which is how I did this one. I just folded it in half like this, placed it right there, and use my rotary cutter right against that. If that doesn't feel as comfortable, you can place it here. You can cut with your rotary cutter or mark, and you can flip it over if you like and do the other side as well. Whatever you find is the most comfortable for you. So I'm going to go ahead and also trim this. Once I have those pieces done, I will be ready to start on my handles. Step 3 is going to be our handle prep. And even though I go over handle prep in every single video, I'm still going to go over it from start to finish with you, just because I never know if this is your first video with me. So if you know how to put your handles together and do your top stitching, you are welcome to fast forward to the next step. Remember, the timestamps are in the information section of the video. So you had originally started with 4 strips, all of the same size. These are going to be 1-inch finished handles. So I had 4 2-inch finished or 2-inch cut pieces. What I did already, just to save a little bit of time, is at my machine, I took 2 of my pieces and they're marked H and I. It really does not matter. They're all the exact same. But this, for demonstration purposes, is going to be I. So these are my I pieces, just in case you have cut them differently. I've taken my 2 I pieces and I placed them right sides together. I didn't trim off my selvage. I sewed a 45-degree angle so that I can make one nice long strap. Now that that's sewn, I'm going to go ahead and just trim off my excess here to roughly 1/4 of an inch. I say roughly because it's not close on one end, but that's okay. It does not make a huge difference. When I open up this seam, I'm either going to press it open and use my clapper to hold that nice and flat. I do like to open my seam. I can also put 1/8 inch tape underneath, or I can add a little bit of top stitching. Not super necessary, but it's totally your choice. At the machine, I'll probably decide how I want to handle that. Now that I have this ready to go, I'm going to fold it in half because, again, we're not doing a tri-fold handle. We're just doing a double fold or a single fold. However, what do you call it? I call it double because there's 2 layers, but I guess it's a single fold because it's 1 fold. This conversation will continue for the rest of my life. We are folding this in half. If you don't want to fold it in half because you don't like a raw edge, you can mark the center and fold in. It's your choice. I'm just going to fold mine in half, and I'm going to top stitch the long edges 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch all the way down and make my nice long handle. I'm also going to do the same thing with my eyes, my H's, excuse me. These are going to be for the fixed handles. What I have done with these pieces is, again, folded it in half. I did 1/8 inch on each side and 1/4 inch. Now that they're done, I still have not trimmed off my selvages, and the reason is I'm going to decide how long I want these handles when I get to adding them onto the bag. On this sample right here, I cut my handles about 16 inches, so they're little short grab handles because I have the long handle right here. If you're not doing an adjustable handle, you might want to make those longer so that they are shoulder length. Or even if you are doing the adjustable handle, you might want to make them somewhere in between. You have the full length of your cork here and you can decide. More than likely for this one, I'm going to go on the shorter side. I kind of like how that looks. So when we get to adding the handles on, I will make my decision and I'll do some trimming. In the meantime, I'm going to head to the machine and get this one all top stitched, and then we can talk about adding the hardware. And since I'm heading over to the machine to do all of the top stitching on my adjustable handle and my fixed handles, I'm going to take with me my E pieces. Double check your measurements because sometimes these are close to another piece and we don't want to get those mixed up. So these are going to be the E D-ring tabs. And since I'm doing my top stitching, I'm going to do the same thing on here. I'm going to fold each of these in half. And I'm going to top stitch 1/8 and 1/4 from each side. These will be ready to go, and then I can add hardware to those as well. To finish up our handle, our adjustable handle, and our tabs, we're going to add our hardware. So the first thing we're going to do is for the E tabs, you're going to be folding them over a D-ring, just like I have here. It's not going to be completely folded in half. There is a measurement provided in your pattern, but it's also the same measurement as the guide that's on your template here, on your side panel template. So what I've done is I just added my D-ring onto my E tab. I'm going to fold it over and use some double-sided tape just to get that to stay put. You can sew this, if you would like to. I am not going to because I will be sewing this in a later step and I'm going to be adding rivets as well. So for right now, I'm just kind of prepping this. And I'm just checking to make sure that from the raw edge to the fold, so I'm not including the hardware, raw edge to fold is the same size provided in the pattern, which is the same as the guide on my template. So these are all set for right now. I'm going to set those aside. In order to make my adjustable handle, you can sew, but I am going to add rivets to mine. So I have my 2 eye pieces. They were sewn together to make one nice long handle. I did clean up my ends, got everything top stitched and ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my slide, and that is my slide right there. It has that center bar. I'm going to take my handle and I'm going to put it up and over that bar, and I'm going to slide it down roughly 1 inch or so. I don't measure or do anything specific. So once I have that where I want it, I'm just going to fold this edge down. At the machine, you can stitch right here 1/8 inch, go across that a couple times to secure it. What I'm going to do in lieu of sewing is I'm going to punch a hole and set a rivet. So I have my punch tool set on 2.5, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball the center. I would say I'm about 1/2 inch or so up. So I'm kind of centered left to right and centered top to bottom. Punch my hole and take my rivet and put my rivet through there. I have my rivet tool that's already got the die in it. Pop that on, and I'm going to go ahead and set that. And that's done. So now that that is finished, I'm going to take my handle. First thing I want to do is make sure that it's not twisted. I'm going to take one of my swivel hooks, put that on. It's kind of facing out. So here is the raw edge of my handle. I'm facing my swivel hook out, leaving that loose. We're not going to sew it. I'm going to put this end back up. I'll put a little even more this time, and over where I already riveted or sewed. This swivel hook kind of hangs out here, and down on the end, I'm going to add my second one. So here is my slide, the right side of my slide. I'm going to take my swivel hook and put that on here, so it's also facing upward. And for this one, since this is going to be exposed, I'm going to fold it twice. I'm going to fold it once And then I'm going to pull that over here. Same way that you would do with cotton fabric. I'm just doing this to kind of clean up my edge a little bit, make it look nicer. So that's how that looks. You can just fold it once. That's totally fine. You're going to sew that in place, or if you want to add a rivet, you're going to do that right now. So I've got that in place. I'm going to punch through. My rivets are long enough to go through 4 to 6 layers of cork without a problem. And now I have 6 for this. Just kind of centering that. And I'll add my rivet. I grabbed an extra rivet. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put 2 here, but I think 1 is just fine. And now I'm going to go ahead and set that. And I'm done. So yours will either have stitching or rivets. I'm going to put my extra rivet away for later. And these are all done. So this handle I don't need until the bag is completely finished. And I will attach it onto my D-ring tabs, which I have to attach to the bag in another step. So I'm going to go ahead and move these out of the way, and we're going to move on to our next step. For step 4, we're going to add our trimmed F accents to our A pieces. So this is going to make the outside of the bag. I have my A's all ready to go. I'm just going to decide if I care on mine, which is the top and the bottom. I feel like that's the top. We definitely want to know which is upright, which is top if you have directional. I don't really on this, but sometimes from certain angles it looks better one way or another. So I'm going to call these my tops, which means my accents are going to go down here on the bottom. In order to place these, you're going to need your ruler, or you're going to want to use your template here, this line. I've already gone ahead and done my markings, and in your pattern, it's going to give you the measurement. So on the back of each of your F pieces, you're going to measure up as the pattern says, or again, use your template, and you're going to make a line right here. And then above that line, you're going to add some double stick tape. I usually use 1/8 inch. I just grabbed this one, which is 1/4 because it was close by. Really doesn't make much of a difference. But we want to add our tape above the line. So it's in the smaller portion right here. And the reason that I did the accents this way is so that we can save a little bit on cork, but also save on bulk. If I had just made these full pieces, these A pieces right here, made them taller, we would have a lot of bulk and honestly a lot of wasted cork. So I thought that it was better this way to save on some of our valuable, expensive cork, and also to help our machines out by just having the accent just kind of grab on a little bit. And I'll show you what I mean by that as soon as I get this tape down. So I'm just going to add a little bit of tape. I kind of like to add it here because that's where I'm going to be stitching. And I want to make sure that as I'm stitching that my curve isn't shifting on me. So now that I have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and take my paper off. I'll move these 2 over. There's also a measurement provided for you in the pattern after you get your pieces kind of stuck down. Definitely going to want to check that because we want to make sure that all of these pieces we're kind of checking as we go. This bag can be a little bit more on the fussy side because we don't have as much wiggle room as we do with our standard box corner type of bag. So I have my F piece wrong side up. I'm going to flip my A piece over. And I'm just going to line this up right on that line and line up my edges just like so. That's how it's going to look from the back, and from the front, there is my piece. And it might look a little bit weird. It looks like it's very tall, but just remember a lot of this is going to kind of tuck under when the bag is being sewn together. So before I do any stitching, I'm going to head to my mat. I'm going to check my height and make sure that it is exactly what the pattern says. If for some reason anything is off, another way that you can do this is you can place your A piece on your cutting mat, and then you can take your F piece and kind of line it up on the measurement provided, and you can place it that way. Whatever feels the most comfortable for you. So I'm going to get this one stuck down. When I'm all set and I have my correct height, I'm going to head over to my machine and I'm going to top stitch just on this curve right here. I can do 1/8 and 1/4. I can do either or, whatever I like. I tend to like doing the 1/8 and the 1/4. I like the double top stitching because it mimics my handles. So I'm going to head to my machine and I'm going to get these 2 pieces all ready. So I finished up my outside, front, and back. I top stitched my F accents on. There's how it looks from the back. I went ahead and did an 1/8 and a 1/4. I liked how that looked. You can choose whatever your preference is. I just like to match my handles. I love doing a double top stitching. So now that these are done, I think this is a great time to add a handmade tag, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. I know that a lot of this down here is going to be on the actual bottom of the bag. Let's look at the finished sample here. So when we look here, I'm only seeing a couple inches of this. So I definitely want to stay kind of above that. I could go up in the center if I wanted and do it when my handles are on. I think that I'm going to go ahead and add it down here. So I'm going to place mine, I think, kind of off-centered. I always do mine a little off-centered. I'm going to do it before I get to the curve here. And I think I want to do it kind of just above my accent. I think that looks nice. So that's what I'm going to do. If you want to do yours in the center, you can. Actually, that kind of looks cute too. I'm going to do it off to the side. I'm going to stick with my original plan. If you want to put yours between your handles, I would wait until we get those on and then you can add it. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and add mine. These both look pretty much the same to me. I don't see one as being like a nicer, a front or a back. So I'm just going to go ahead and place this. I'm just butting the washer kind of right up against the accent. I'm going to mark where I need to cut. Come on, there we go. And I'm just gonna grab my seam ripper. Now go ahead and just poke in and out. And where's my other mark? There it is. You probably can't see it because I can barely see it. So there we go, I've got that all set. I'm gonna add my handmade tag. Now I don't put anything behind this aside from the washer, just because it's not weight bearing. I feel like it's totally fine. If you want to put something on the back, a piece of duct tape, or even fuse a piece of interfacing, whatever you'd like to do, that's your choice. Honestly, most of my bags are just samples, so I'm just gonna leave it as is, but if you wanna cover that rough washer, you can do that. So now I've got that all set. Looks good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and put these aside and we're gonna work on our next step. I moved my front and back pieces too soon because for step 5, we're going to be adding our double D-ring connectors as well as our J-tabs to the front and back. So let's talk through this a little bit since this is kind of a first for one of my patterns. Maybe it's a first for you as well. So I have 2 of my J-tabs and 2 of my double D-rings. I've already prepared one of my other pieces, which I'll show you in just a minute. So for these, because we have kind of 2 anchor points on this type of hardware, we have to have some way to sew it down to the bag, and then we will add the handle onto it as well. As I had mentioned earlier, there are certain types of hardware that do not have this. Basically, the entire hardware anchors itself to your bag, and then you're going to add the handle to that. These are a little bit different, and again, can also be subbed with rectangle rings if you would rather do something like that. I've done that in a few other bags in the past, but this hardware and this tab style are a little bit different. So what I would normally do in the past when I create a tab like this or a strap connector is that I would make kind of the reverse, the mirror image of this over here. And what happens with that is it adds a little bit of extra bulk when you're sewing, and it also leaves a little bit of extra room for error. And what I mean by that is when you fold this in half, let's just say that that it kind of looks like this, kind of looks almost like a little tag. When we fold this in half and add our hardware, things don't get cut evenly, they shift around a little bit, and so it kind of just leaves more room for you to have to do trimming. So the reason that I created these strap connectors with this style and this shape is because it's very easy to just tuck this piece into the back. We don't see it. We only have 1 layer of cork here that we have to worry about. We don't have to worry about anything shifting. And when it's sewn onto the bag, we're sewing through 2 layers and it's easy to secure. So the first thing that you're going to do with all 4 of your pieces is on the back here, you're going to add a little bit of double-sided tape. And I just wanted to also mention, this is not part of this pattern, but I had showed you earlier, and let me grab them for you, the other tabs, the other shapes that I had to offer. These are not included in the pattern, but they can be subbed. And when you look at these, the only one that I really want to address is this one right here. This one, which is technically the easiest one to sew because it's all straight edges, this little piece is really short. And when you look at that, how come this and this are the same size, but this is so short? And that's because when you fold this down, because of the point, I didn't want that to have to stick out. And that will make a little bit more sense when I show you how to add these on. But I just kind of wanted to mention that. So if you don't like this shape and you want to try some other shapes, you can do that. This is the one included in the pattern. I designed the other three as just kind of some fun options. So I have each of my J tabs. I put some tape on the back. I'm going to go ahead and take the paper off, and I'm going to add my double D-ring right onto here. All right, a little piece of dog hair. And once I have that on there, I'm going to pull this down until this part right here goes just about to the bottom. I don't go all the way to the bottom. I go just kind of almost there. And I pull my D-ring up so it's nice and taut, and I just press that down. I don't even care if that's totally straight because no one will see that. From the front, it looks perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. So I'll do another one here for you. I take my paper off, put that through here, fold that down. These are all made for 1-inch hardware because the width here that goes through the hardware is 1 inch. This is wider, but the part that it attaches to your hardware is 1 inch. So if you had D-rings or rectangle rings that were wider, you're gonna have some space in here. It's gonna wiggle around a little bit. We want them nice and tight. So I have that there. If this was that pointed diamond shape, this piece would be backed up a little bit more because of the point. Here, we don't have to worry about it. Now that I have that where I want it, I'm going to add them onto the front of my bag. So 2 go onto the front and 2 onto the back. What I've already done is I took the measurements from the pattern and I drew some lines. I don't know if you can see those or not, but I drew them with a heat erasable pen because I find it easier even when I'm doing this off camera than using a ruler. So I first take my ruler, I find the center and I make a mark in the center. And then I'm going to use the measurement provided. First, I'm going to measure down, and I drew some lines right here, the measurement that it provides on how far down I want those. Then I want them evenly spaced from the center. So I measure out from the center to here, and I measure out this way. These 2 lines right here are the width measurement that are provided. And when it's time to add these down, we're going to add some more tape onto the back, and you're going to place them, ignoring the hardware, paying attention to the fold of your cork and the edge right here. We're going to place them just like this and just like this. So if you grab your ruler and you measure from the top to this fold, that should be the first measurement provided. And if you measure from here, from the inside of that fold to this fold, that should be the second one. And when we look here, these are all set to go. I already taped them down. So I added tape on the outside and I placed them, checked to make sure they were straight. I double checked my measurements a few times. And now it's time to sew them. And what I find is that my instinct is to use my 1/8 inch compensating foot because that can kind of ride right along and give me nice even 1/8 inch top stitching. However, it's never that easy when it comes to something like this that has hardware attached. I can't get the foot back far enough and I can't get close enough to here. So that's why I find that using my cording foot, this one right here, my nice narrow foot, works so much better because I can really get in where I need to and I can get nice and tight up here. So what I like to do, just to make sure that I have a guide and I'm happy in the end, is I take my heat erasable pen, and I don't use a ruler for this, you can, but I just kind of eyeball about 1/8 of an inch and I make some marks because this can all go away when I'm done. And I just kind of do that. This gives me a reference point, and then I'm not trying to worry about my foot and whether or not I'm even. There's too many things to kind of concentrate on. Now that I have a reference, I can just pay attention to where my stitches are. And I'm doing this lightly, and what I mean is that I'm not digging it in. Sometimes these pens can take some of the color away, or they can leave like a white mark. So I'm just lightly doing that. After I get done sewing, I'll take it off with my lighter. So I'm just going to do the same thing over here. So again, I'm just kind of eyeballing. And if you want to use your ruler, by all means, you can do that. Just kind of lightly drawing 1/8 of an inch. If you want to do some fancy stitches, you can do that. I might add some rivets to this when I'm done just because they will be extra security, but also decorative as well, kind of deciding as I go. So that's how I want it to look when I'm done sewing. So I'm going to get this one prepared, head over to the sewing machine and do my sewing, and then we'll talk about removing the pen and see if I want to add some rivets. Now that my tabs are sewn in place, we're going to go ahead and finish up step 5. So as I showed you before, I did go ahead and draw with my pen and I stitched right around, maybe not exactly on the pen mark, but I did use that to kind of guide my foot. That way I know that my stitching is straight. So now that I have that all set, I'm going to take my lighter and I just run my lighter right along the edge here, and just like magic, it gets rid of my pen line. So just like that, do the same thing over here. And now I have nice even stitching. I'm happy with how it looks. And I didn't have to struggle with the wrong foot or changing feet. So there we go, get rid of that. And while I'm at it, I might as well take these lines that are back here. I can get rid of those, my center mark, and just kind of clean that up just a little bit. All right, so all that's gone. Let me finish this one. We'll be good to go. You can also do this with the iron, but I just think it's a little bit easier to get my lighter in there. So there, now that looks perfect. Get rid of that little thread there. So the last thing we're going to do to finish these up is add our handles. So I went ahead and added on some strap ends. Those, again, are totally optional. You do not need to add those, but I decided I wanted to, so I did those already. They're just screwed in place. If I was using this bag, I would also add some glue behind these, and I may go back and do that later. Since this is a sample, I'm not as concerned as I probably should be. I really should treat every single one as if it's something that's going to be sold or used, but I don't. So now that I have these all set to go, I'm going to move one handle and one piece aside. We're going to be working on half at a time. So one handle goes on one front or back piece. And what I'm going to do here, because I have now a wrong and a right, because I have the back side of my little end caps, is I'm just going to kind of tuck that in like so. I'm going to make sure that this is not twisted. Just like this. I want to make sure my handle does not have any twists in it. And at the machine, I can fold this right over and stitch it in place. But what I'm going to do is add some rivets. Once I have this in place, these two will be done. What I also did off camera is I trimmed my handles down. I had mentioned that I left them long. I left the selvages on just because I wasn't sure what size I wanted. I decided to cut these at 18 inches. The sample had them at 16, and I wanted to go just a tiny bit longer. I like to have different samples with different lengths. I think one of them has a full length handle, so I just kind of picked some different measurements and see what I like. The 16 worked really nicely, definitely a short little handle. I went a tiny bit longer on this one. So now that I have that in place, I'm going to add my rivets. You can take it to the machine and sew it. I will prep the other one so we can do this one more time together. I dropped my handle, hang on. Okay, so again, I have my bag here ready to go. I'm going to take my handle, and I don't want this. I want this. I want to make sure that there isn't a twist. I'm going to add my handle right through here, just like so. And I'm going to I don't know, I'm probably an inch, inch and a half. It depends on if you're sewing or if you're riveting, how far you want to pull that. But I'm about an inch to an inch and a half. I'm going to fold that in half just like this. I'm going to punch a hole right through here and add a rivet. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and I always check before I do it, make sure my handle's not twisted, and I try to make my ends as symmetrical as I can. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and add some rivets to my tabs, and I'll be back to show you how those look. All right, I am all set. If you did your stitching, you will have some stitching lines right here. I went ahead and riveted my handles on. I also added one to each of my tabs, really more for decoration than anything else. I just thought it looked pretty, looked balanced, so I'm really happy with these. These are all done for right now. I'm gonna set those aside and we're gonna continue working on the other parts of our bag. For step 6, we're going to make our outside pockets. So you're going to need your C and your G pieces. C is going to be the bottom, which is from your main print, and G is your accent. You're going to take these pieces and you're going to place them right sides together, just like that. You're going to stitch 1/4 inch all the way across there, and then you're going to open that seam up and top stitch. And you want to top stitch 1/8 inch on each side. When you're done, you're going to go ahead and trim just a little bit using your template 1. We had discussed earlier that we were going to need that again, and this is what we're going to need that for. So when you place that on top of your piece, you're just trimming your corners and tapering the side just a little bit. That way these match up to the side panels. You're going to also be adding on your lining pieces, which are M. If you find that it's easier and you don't want to do your trimming now, after you have your piece prepared and it's still straight, just like this, it's got the seam allowance sewn and the top stitching done, you can take your M piece, place it right sides together. You can go ahead and sew across the top 1/4 inch, fold that back and top stitch it, and then you can do your trimming. And I think I'm going to do one each way just to show you. Whatever you find is easier. I've done it both ways and I'm good with either one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my finished piece, take my M, place it right sides together just like this, even though I haven't trimmed it yet. And I'm just going to sew, again, 1/4 inch across here, fold my M back and top stitch either 1/8 or 1/4 across the top, whichever I like, maybe both. And then I can go ahead and do my trimming. I'm going to do this one as well, and I will sew that piece on and I'll trim it all as one. So to finish up our side pockets, now that they are sewn together and top stitched, we're going to trim using the template 1, that is for the side panel. And it's really just rounding the corners and again, tapering a little bit on the side here. So this one I trimmed my pieces before I sewed them together. This one I'm going to trim them afterwards. I find that it really doesn't make any difference. It's whatever you find is easier or whichever order you end up doing it in. The reason that I've done it both ways is more than likely because I get kind of excited. I start sewing and then I forget. And trimming it afterwards is totally fine. It means you have less that you have to worry about lining up because it's already stitched. You'll notice that I'm trimming a little bit, about 1/2 inch or so off the bottom of the pocket. I did leave that a little bit longer because I know that sometimes mistakes happen, things shift a little bit, sometimes seam allowances aren't quite right. And also I noticed that one of my pattern testers left her pocket intentionally peeking out from the top. So she got kind of like an extra little like piping or binding look to it, which you could do as well. I thought about doing it, but then I decided just to do it the way the pattern says. So these are all set. For right now, I'm going to set these aside and we're going to start working on the side panels. Step 7, we're going to add our E tabs with the D-rings to our B side panels. So I've already prepped this one, but let's go ahead and start from the beginning over here. So I am using my acrylic template. You do not have to use that. You can use the measurements provided in your pattern. If you're going to use the measurements, you're first going to want to find the center. You can find the center at the top or bottom or both. We always want our pieces to be nice and centered. Since I'm using this and I have my tab placement here, I'm just going to go ahead and put a little dot in each of those holes. You could also punch a hole in your paper template if you wanted to, and you could do it that way. Now that I have the holes, I am just going to kind of sketch a little line just so it's easier for me to see. That's going to be my placement. Use your ruler if that's easier for you. The measurements are in your pattern. I'm going to add some tape, which I've already done here, some double-sided tape to the back. And I want this backside down. So I don't want to see that edge. And I want my D-ring up towards the narrow part. So I'm just going to place that on the lines that I have here. That. The placement guide that's on your paper template is measuring from the bottom raw edge to the folded edge, just like the measurement that was in, I believe it was step 3. I might be incorrect. Maybe it was I think it was step 3. So now that's in place. I'm ready to head to my sewing machine. And what I'm going to do over there is I'm going to stitch a box right around the outside here. I'm going to do it about an inch, inch and a half, somewhere around there. And I'm going to draw an X as well, which I've already sketched out with my pen. That way it's nice and secure. Now, as far as the top is concerned, we don't want this flopping backwards. We want to make sure that this is nice and tight because this is where we're going to add our adjustable handle, and we want to make sure that it can support the entire weight of the bag. So I'll have a box here, I'll have an X, but I also need to secure here. So at the machine, you can stitch back and forth as close to your D-ring as possible, or you can add a rivet. You can do that before or after you sew. I'm going to add a rivet now. Just because it really doesn't make a difference what order you add it in. But I'm going to try to get nice and close to my D-ring, right in the center here. So I'm probably a ½ inch down from the fold, and I'm going through all my layers. I don't want this to flop over. I did that in one of my samples accidentally. I was chatting, not paying attention, and I ended up putting the rivet only through the D-ring or through the tab. That doesn't really work so well because it was kind of flopping around. And I had to fix it while my bag was already finished because I was not dismantling the entire bag to do so. It was not one of my finer moments, but I made it work. That's why we have multiple tools to get the job done. So I'm going to put my little rivet through there, add my back, and go ahead and set that. If you're stitching, you're just going to be stitching in the same place as I have my rivet. If you feel better and you want to stitch the entire thing down instead of having a box here, if you want to go the entire dimension, you can do that as well. I did what I did because I thought it looked nicer. When the pockets are on, it will hide that little X because I don't mind it, but it's not my favorite feature. So I like doing it this way, and then the pocket will cover that. If you want to sew even more, really make it secure, you can do that as well. So I've got my rivets in. I'm going to go to the machine and sew this. Once these are sewn down, we will be ready to add our pockets. To finish up our side panels, now that we have them stitched in place, we're going to add our pockets. So I grabbed my finished pockets that we made earlier. I also have my tabs all sewn in, and I did have my rivets that I had done earlier. I'm going to grab a lighter because I did forget to get rid of my markings. Just kind of clean up my threads and get rid of my X marks. So now each of my side panels has a tab sewn at the bottom in an X and also riveted that goes right through to the back. On each of these, I'm going to take one of my pockets and I'm just going to line this up right along the bottom edge. And because my X is kind of lower, it's all the way down here, I don't see that hanging out at the top of the pocket. That was very important to me because I just liked how clean it looked with that kind of being hidden. I am a little bit off here, as always. There we go. Okay, still hidden, just off. So let's clip that in place correctly. I'm going to take this back to the sewing machine and stitch 1/8 of an inch around the sides and the bottom of the pocket to secure that in place. Once I have that done, these will be finished and I can set them aside until it's time to put our bag together. Step 8, we're going to add our zippered pocket to one of our lining pieces. So you're going to grab one of your K pieces, both of your O pocket pieces. You'll want your shorter zipper. I've got a couple of clips here. You can also use pins, and you're going to need a ruler and a marking tool. I am using my ultimate zipper template right here. That's how I did all of my marks. You can do this with a standard ruler. The measurements are provided in the pattern. So the first thing I'm going to do is on the wrong side, and because it's hard for you to tell, I did write just right here so you can see that this is the back or wrong side. So this is either the back of your fabric or your interfacing side, depending on what type of fabric you're using. You're going to find your center and you're going to draw this 1/2 inch high box as per the measurements in your pattern. So what I do is I always find my center, I draw my first line, my first horizontal line, I go down to my second one and then my third, and then I close it up. Because I used my ultimate zipper template, I don't have my lines extending, but sometimes yours might look like this, and that's totally fine. This will all be on the back and no one will see it. I've also drawn the little V's just right here. Those are going to be a guide for cutting. I'm going to take one of my O pieces and I'm going to place, this is the right side of my lining piece. This is the right side of my pocket. I'm going to place these right sides together, centered, and I want to align the top edges. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a couple clips here and I'll show you how this looks on the other side. So this is my interfacing or back side. Right here is going to be my right side, and that's the right side of my pocket. It's aligned on the top and it's centered. Now that I have that ready to go, I'm going to head to my machine and stitch around the box, just around the outside. When I'm done, I will cut on the center line between the 2 points of my V's, and I will use my scissors to cut back as close to my stitching without cutting through as I can. From there, we'll be able to add our zipper. Just a reminder before we get into adding our zipper, your lining piece is taller than it is wide. So check your measurements. It should be taller this way and narrower this way. Make sure that you draw your zipper correctly. If you turn, your zipper is going to be going the completely wrong direction in your bag. At the machine, I went ahead and I stitched my O pocket, one of them, there's two, to the back of, right sides together with my K piece. I stitched around the box that I drew, and then I went ahead and I cut with my rotary cutter on the center line, and I used my scissors to cut back into the corners. I'm going to take my clips out and pull my pocket piece through to the back, and then I'm going to head over to the ironing board, and I'm going to clean this up, get myself a nice clean rectangular opening, and then I'll be ready to add my zipper. So I'm just going to scoot over to the ironing board real quick, get this nice and pressed, and I'll be back to add my zipper. All right, I gave that a quick press at the ironing board. So this is the front of my pocket. On the back side here where my O pocket is, I added some tape on the long side. I'm going to go ahead and take my paper off. And I'm going to place my shorter zipper. I've got that all prepared. I've got my pull on. And I'm just going to place that here. Put my pocket on top. Just like that. Get this nice and even. There should be enough space from the zipper teeth so that your pull is not getting caught on anything. Now that I've got that lined up where I want it, at the machine, I'm going to stitch about a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch all the way around. When I'm done stitching my zipper in place, on the back here, I'm going to trim off the ends of my zipper. I trim them about halfway between the stitching and the edge of the pocket just to get rid of that extra bulk. And I'm going to take my second O piece. This should be the right side. This is also the right side. I'm going to put them right side down together. And I'm going to stitch all the way around, not stitching it to the lining. So it's going to be sewn so it stays loose. So I'm going to head to the machine, stitch my zipper in place, add my pocket, and get that all closed up. And I'll come back to show you how that looks. My zippered pocket is complete now. So I stitched my zipper in place about 1/8 of an inch or so. When I was done, I turned it over and I placed my other O pocket piece right sides together, and I stitched 1/4 inch all the way around. This is not sewn to the lining piece. It is still loose. I did also trim the ends of my zipper, probably about 1/4 to 1/2 inch from the edges here, just to give me a little bit less bulk when I finish this up. So this is all set to go. I can open up my zipper and I've got a nice functioning pocket here. I'm all set with this, so I'm going to set it aside until I'm ready to start assembling. For step 9, I'm going to be creating and adding my divided pocket to the other lining piece. So to begin, I'm going to take my end piece right here, and I'm going to fold this right sides together, and I'm going to make a tube. This tube should be the same width as my lining piece. I'm going to go to the machine and sew 1/4 inch right along here. Before I turn this right side out, I'm going to press that seam open. Then I'm going to turn it right side out and top stitch it. When I have that all set to go, I'll show you how to add that into your K lining piece. I finished preparing my divided pocket. It is top stitched up at the top here. I did sew it right sides together into a long tube. You can see right here, those are my raw edges and my open ends. I sewed that, I pressed my seam open, and then I turned it right side out. That seam that I sewed is right here. It does not need to be at the bottom edge. I roll it up a little bit, and I did press that open before I turned it so it's nice and smooth. I used the measurement in the pattern. I measured down to the top of the pocket and I put that where it needs to go. Now that it's in place, I'm going to go back to my sewing machine and I'm going to finish up this pocket. One other thing to remember, as I mentioned with the zippered pocket, your lining piece is taller than it is wide. So you'll know that you have that correct if your divided pocket is the same width as your piece. If this is turned in correctly, this will be too small. So you can see my edges are nice and lined up, so I'm good to go. So at my machine, I'm going to sew 1/8 inch on my side, my bottom, and my other side. Hold that in place. Then from there, I'm going to decide how I want to divide this up. And because the bag itself is not super wide, I'm probably just going to make a mark in the center and divide it that way. I'll start at the bottom, stitch up, pivot, and come back down. Then I've sewn it twice and all my loose threads will be down here. So I'm going to head to the machine, get my 1/8 inch sewing on, and finish this pocket up. I finished up my other lining piece. The first K piece had my zippered pocket on it. This one has my divided pocket. So I added my pocket with the seam facing down. I have my top stitch edge up here. That's the top of my pocket. I placed it down using the measurement in the pattern. Sewed 1/8 inch on the sides as well as the bottom. I found the center and I stitched from the bottom up, pivoted back down, and came back down to the bottom. You can divide this however you like. Keep in mind though, it's not the biggest pocket, so adding too many, they're gonna get kind of small. So I find that just one in the center is more than enough. So this is all set. I can go ahead and set this aside until it's time to start assembling our bag. We are just about to the assembly step. So the last piece that we need to put together is our top zipper. So for step 10, we're going to be adding our D and P tabs to our zipper. So what I've done is I went ahead and added my pulls. I decided to do a double pull. If you want to do a single pull, that's totally fine. My pulls are going to open away from each other, just like that. I am using some larger zipper pulls, and I just think it looks really pretty on there. I did add my pulls and then I trimmed. So the measurement provided in your pattern needs to be the finished measurement of this zipper. That is a very important measurement. More often than not, I tell you to go larger because we can always trim, and that is true when we start. And I do start larger so that I have some wiggle room to put my pulls on. Sometimes things get a little bit uneven, but what you want to make sure is for this step that this is the exact measurement that's given in the pattern. Otherwise, it's going to be too wide or possibly too narrow to fit into the bag. So now that I have this ready, on the right side of my zipper on each end, I'm going to take one of my D tabs and I'm going to place it right side down. These are purposely overcut. They are wider than the zipper tape to accommodate for various zipper tapes. I found that most of mine fluctuate between 1/8 to 1/4 inch, and I just wanted to make sure that you had some room to play. So I'm going to just place those like that. We'll do some trimming after we're done sewing. On the back side, I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing with my P pieces. So I'm just going to place one of these right sides together with the cork. and place my other one right sides together. So right now you should be looking at the wrong side of the cork as well as your fabric. This is the back and this is the back. At the machine, I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch just down these edges right here. And when I'm finished, I'm going to pull both of these back like so, get those nice and smooth. And I'm going to do some 1/8 inch stitching, some top stitching, and then I will trim so it's even on this top and bottom. I've got my top zipper all stitched, so I sewed my D and P tabs right sides together on opposite ends of the zipper. I then folded them back and top stitched about 1/8 inch. Now I can trim up these edges right here, and I'm also going to check my width. I want to make sure that this is the same width as my outside and lining pieces, the same size that the pattern provides. So I'm going to just go over to my cutting mat. I'm just going to trim up those edges and I'll come right back. I trimmed up my sides so that they are even with the zipper tape, so everything is nice and flush now. And then on the ends here, I was about 1/4 inch off from my measurement. So I just found the center and made sure to take off equal amounts from either end. Now this is ready to add to the bag. When it comes to adding this into the bag, it is not going to be like the tabs that I did on a couple of other bags like Linda or Charlotte. This is not the type of tab where it's going to leave it open on the ends. That's why these are raw edges right here, because they will get sewn in. So now that I have this done and all of my pieces, it's time to start assembling our bag. For step 11, we're going to assemble our bag. So we have a few different steps to do within finishing the bag, but we're just going to take it one little bit at a time. So what I've started with is I grabbed my 2 outside pieces and I grabbed my 2 lining pieces, and I added some double-sided tape to the top of each of those. I have my clips nearby, they're right here, but I'm also going to use kind of a combination of the tape and clips. I also have my outside zipper, which is all set to go. Everything is trimmed and ready. So I'm gonna start with 1 outside and 1 lining. I always like to start with my front. It's just a habit I've gotten into. So I'm going to start with my front, which is the one that has the handmade tag. And I think on the other side of the front, I think I want to do my divided pockets. So I'm going to set my zippered pocket and my back to the side. I'm going to grab the divided pockets and this one. Whatever you want behind the front in the actual front of the bag is the piece that you're going to grab. If you want that to be your zippered pocket, that is totally fine. I want to do my divided pockets and I want my zippered pocket on the back. So I have those, I've got my tape on there, and I have my zipper. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just make sure my tape is on there, get my paper off. And I'll do the same thing with my lining so I'm all good to go. Paper, maybe. Gotta get the tape to stick and then take the paper off. There we go. So these are ready to go. I'm gonna take my zipper, my outside zipper here, and I'm going to place it right side down with the outside front. And I'm just gonna line up the tabs right here. I'm gonna line up my zipper. You may have to fuss with this a little bit because of your zipper pulls. Mine are kind of on the larger side, so when I'm sewing, I'm more than likely going to open up my zipper and kind of move them out of the way. For now, I'm just going to let them kind of start right in the middle here, and then I can adjust this as need be. That's why I like to use tape and clips. I find that it helps. So that is stuck down now. Now I'm going to take my lining piece and I'm going to place that right sides down. So I have my zipper right sides together with the outside. I have my lining right sides together with the outside. If you are not using double-sided tape, which I would be surprised at this point if you are not, what you might want to do is head to the machine and baste your outside using an 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm using tape on both pieces. I feel very confident that nothing is going to move. I'm also going to throw just a few clips in just to help out. That way everything is secure. I don't have any wavy zippers or anything funny going on here. Everything is lined up nicely. Just like to give you some options in case you are not as big of a fan of tape as I am. But if you're not at this point, tell me why. I'm just curious. Okay, so I have my pieces. Again, let's look at it one more time before we sew. We've got our outside front, right sides together with the zipper. Our lining piece, I chose the one with divided pockets, right sides together. I'm gonna head to the machine and stitch 1/4 inch all the way across here. When I'm done, I'll be ready to add my other 2 pieces, and I will come back and show you just to make sure that you get everything lined up perfectly. So I'll be right back. The first half is sewn together. I did sew it twice. The reason is when you're coming off of some of these kind of thicker areas, sometimes you'll get a skip stitch here and there, especially if you're not using a hump jumper. And I find that I do get skip stitches, I think in part because of the compensating foot. Sometimes it just kind of does its own thing. So just to be sure, I stitch from right to left and then from left to right. I flip it over. So I do one on the lining side, one on the outside. Then I've stitched it twice. I know everything is secure and I don't have to worry about anything. I did not do any top stitching. I didn't even turn my pieces. I wanted to work together and show you how to do that. So I'm going to fold my lining and my outside back. If you need to add some clips here, you can do that. I did also move my zipper pulls out of the way when I was sewing. So now that I have my first half done, I'm going to grab my second half and repeat the process. I'm going to take my outside back and I'm going to peel off the paper. This is going to go on the other side of the zipper, so it's also going to be right sides together with the front. So I've got my cork right sides together, but I've also got this, I'll do it this way, right sides together with the opposite side of the zipper. I'm making sandwich number 2. And this one's going to be a little bit bulkier, not because of the layers, but because of the other pocket pieces and the handles. So I'm just going to kind of clip that down. It'll just kind of hold everything in place. And now I'm going to slowly work along the top here, making sure this is straight and everything's aligned. Move my zipper pulls, which seem to be getting in my way more now, and that's okay. I can adjust this at the machine when it's time to sew. If I start sewing away from the zipper pulls as I get closer to them, I'll just put my foot down, move the pulls, and then keep sewing. So I've got part number 1 done here. I've got front and back right sides together. On the back side of the zipper, I'm going to take my zippered pocket lining piece, take the paper off of that, and this is going to go right sides together with the opposite side of the lining. It's going to go right side to the back of the zipper. And now that it's time to sew, I can pull this zippered pocket back. I can actually add a clip there if I need to. If it gets caught in that seam allowance, it's totally fine. But if you need to do that so that you don't have extra bulk, that is fine as well. And as I go, because it's, again, kind of bumpy and lumpy here, I'm just lining it up on my tape, but I'm also adding some clips as I go so that nothing moves. I am as secure as I can be. I can't pick up a clip, but that's okay. There we go. Get this. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing. Again, just 1/4 inch all the way across here. More than likely, I'll sew, flip it over, and sew from the opposite side. That way it's sewn twice. Side number 2 is all stitched on. So now let's do some top stitching. What we're going to do here is open this up. I want my lining pieces facing down and my outside pieces facing up, just like this, so I can see the opposite side of the zipper. And I'm just going to either press this at the iron or give this a gentle tug. I want to make sure that what's not happening is this. I don't want my lining fabric to roll up. I want to make sure that it is smooth. So you can press if you want to. I'm going to use some clips just to hold everything flat. We're going to top stitch about 1/8 inch on either side of the zipper. And you will sew all the way across. You will go from one side to the other. Sometimes when you're adding zipper tabs, depending on the style, you're not going to top stitch all the way to the end. In this case, you are, because these tabs are going to get sewn in to the side panels later on. So just in case you are coming fresh off of another one of my videos where I told you not to do that, this one, we're going to top stitch the whole piece. I've got that nice and smooth. I can see my zipper pulls. My lining fabric is not rolling. Over here, looks good. It always looks better on the front because that's where we're fussing the most. So at my machine with my 1/8 inch foot, I'm gonna top stitch all the way along either side of the zipper. I'm going through both layers. When this is complete, we're going to talk about adding those side panels and how a stapler is going to change your life. I've got my top stitching all set on my zipper. So now before we can add our side panels, we need to close up the bottom edges. So I'm going to open my zipper here. That's going to be important for our finishing steps. I'm going to pull the bottom edges of the outside right sides together. And I'm also going to put the lining pieces right sides together. And the only place we're going to be sewing is the bottom edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some clips down here, making sure everything is aligned. And I'll do the same thing on my lining side. So I've got my lining pieces right sides together. And I'm just going to add some clips. I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Oops, there we go. On the outside, I'm going to sew all the way across the bottom. This is kind of similar to what we have done in many other bags. It also, at this point, kind of looks like a boxy pouch, which it's not, but it kind of has that same look at this moment. So we're going to sew all the way across 1/4 inch, and on the lining, we're going to sew about 1 inch to 1.5 inches on either side. Leave a nice big opening for turning. Once that's done, we'll start talking about our side panels. So I've got my outside bottom all sewn, that is completely closed. And on the lining, I sewed a couple inches on either end, and I have a big opening here for turning. So what we're going to do is I am going to use my stapler. I find that this is the best tool to make this bag smooth, to make my curves look nice. If you don't have a stapler, or if that's not your thing, you can absolutely baste using 1/8 inch. So once I show you how to put these pieces in place, you can take them to the sewing machine and baste 1/8 inch. Spend your time kind of being fussy, getting your curves smooth, getting everything in place, worrying about puckers. And then when it comes time for your 1/4 inch, everything goes together much nicer. So instead of doing 1/8 inch basting, I'm going to staple. So I'm going to show you how to do one of these and kind of talk you through it. And then I'm just going to turn on some music and sit here and just staple away until everything is ready to go. I will say this as well. If you find it more comfortable to add one of your end panels, or your side panels, excuse me, to one of your pieces, baste it, sew it, prep it, get it ready to go, and then come back and do one at a time, by all means do that. I personally like to get them all stapled and ready to go, and then go to my machine and do my 1/4 inch sewing. It's your choice, whatever feels the most comfortable for you. If you feel like they're kind of getting in your way, do one at a time, or at least do half at a time. Maybe do your outside and then do your lining. The choice is yours, but I just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit before we get into it. So now we're going to go ahead and finish up step 11, and we're going to add these side panels. Okay, so now that our bottoms are sewn and we are ready to do our side panels, the first thing we're going to do on all 4 of them, our 2 linings as well as our 2 outsides, is we're going to find the center at the top and bottom. We don't need to worry about that on our pieces here, because the bottom center is going to be the seam and the top is going to be where the tab is. And you can mark the tab if you want to. I did not. So I've got these ready to go. And I also did the same thing on my outside pieces. And I'm just going to start with one of these and kind of show you how I get one of them prepared. So I'm going to move my stapler over. I'm not going to use too many clips, but I do have them nearby. I want to just make sure I'm not knocking anything flying. So what we're going to do here is I turn my bag up on its side. This bottom seam right here, I have not pressed or done anything to it. I'm just going to finger press it open, and I'm going to take one of my end panels and I'm going to put that right side down. So I want to be looking at the wrong side of my bag. I am going to add just one clip just to get this started, and I'm going to line up the center mark right in the center of that seam, and I'm going to add a clip, oops, right there. I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to add my little center mark right to the middle of the tab. Now, we haven't discussed sewing yet, but I will say we are not sewing here just yet, but that's totally fine. We're just going to get it clipped and ready to go. So now that I have that in place, I am just going to start right up at the top here, and I'm going to use my stapler. If you want to sew this, use your clips. And I'm just going to add a little staple and then kind of bring this around, just slowly, and just kind of keep, what I'm doing is kind of like moving this as I need to, because we have a straight edge and we have a curve. So how do we get them to line up? A little bit at a time. Pull this edge. And now we're getting to a straight part, so that part is pretty easy. I can just staple away. And I'm probably a little overkill on the staples, just like I was when I was just using clips, because I'd rather have too many than not enough. As far as the edge of my pocket and the accent, they're basically at about the same point, but if they don't match up, it's okay. It will not matter. And when the bag is done, those are not lined up. So this right here is not lined up with anything. Sometimes it looks like it should, or it feels like it should, and it doesn't matter. Okay. Now, before I do my other curve, I actually like to just kind of spin it around and do the top, because the top curve is tighter. Oops, let me turn this so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so a little bit at a time, trying to avoid puckers as much as I can. For some reason, every single bag that I have made, I've had puckers in the lining. And I don't really care that much, but it's just a weird phenomenon that I cannot seem to not get. So I focus really hard on the outside because the outside counts. And if my lining has a pucker, nobody's gonna know it. So I'm just kind of working. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you watch me do all 4 of these. I will probably record it and fast forward through it just so you can watch, and then I'll show you how it looks all at the end. I think watching me staple things might be like watching paint dry, and I'm only gonna make you do it for a few minutes. Okay, so I've got my top part. Look at how great that looks. Now I'm gonna work on this bottom part because these curves are not as bad. So what I like to do now, I've got my center lined up, is I like to put a staple in the center, and I try to get that seam flat. I'm gonna do some of these straight edges right here. There we go. Now I'm just going to fuss a little bit with my curve. Do it from whatever side is the most comfortable. My staples kind of go in both directions, and I'm staying as close to the edge as I possibly can. This one right here, I definitely went a little bit too far. That looks like it's about 1/4 of an inch in, so I'm probably gonna pull that one out before I even start sewing. That was an accident on my part, but that's okay. Little staple's not gonna hurt anything. It's also why I like these tiny staples, because I'm not gonna notice that I just stapled my cork in the wrong spot. Okay, so this always looks like it's puckering, but it's not where I'm sewing, so I'm not super concerned. Now, I do have a tiny pucker, so I'm just gonna pop that out. Just pull out 2 staples, smooth that out. And boom. Okay, there's one. Let's do this other curve. I'm trying my best to hold it under the camera, but it's very awkward because I want to pull it as close to my body as I possibly can. And you can do that. Okay, last little bit. I'm just spinning it every which way I have to get it lined up. I can staple from any angle I need to. Okay. Okay, before we go on and do another one, because that one actually made me tired from leaning over, let's take a look and see how this is looking. So I've got nice clean curves here. Yes, there is a tiny little pucker right there, and it looks like I shifted just a little bit. I can adjust that at the machine. I'm not super concerned about it. So again, as I was saying, these staples are essentially replacing 1/8 inch basting. If you want to do this with your machine, by all means, go right ahead. Your curves will be a lot smoother if you do the 1/8 inch and then the 1/4 inch instead of just going for the 1/4. Since I have already basted with my stapler, now I'm ready to sew a 1/4 inch. So what I'm gonna do is, before I show you where we're gonna sew, and we'll talk about that, I'm gonna get all the rest of my pieces stapled and in place. If you wanna start with just one, that is totally fine. You can fast forward and I'll show you where you're going to sew. For me, I'm gonna go ahead and get everything all prepared. All right, so here is how we are looking. I went ahead and did all of my side panels. I mentioned earlier you can skip and just do one at a time if that's easier for you. I decided to staple all of mine, so I got them all stapled and ready to go. If you're basting yours, if you want to baste and then sew, baste and then sew, or if you want to baste them all and then sew them all at the same time, it's totally up to you and whatever feels the most comfortable. So now that I have these ready to go, I am ready to head to the machine and do my 1/4 inch stitching. When it comes to sewing these end panels, what you are going to be doing is you're going to stitch as close to this seam as you can. If you can see this seam right here that is kind of pushed outward, that's my zipper. So I want to get as close to that as I can without touching it. We're going to be leaving a gap that will finish later. So I'm going to stitch as close as I can. My goal is to get about right here if I can. I'm going to kind of get as close as I can possibly get. I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch all the way around. And again, I'm going to stop shy of that zipper and that center here. What I have found in the past because of my foot is that my foot wants to sew into thickness, but not always out of it. So a lot of times what will happen is my stitching will start here. I'll stitch around, get close here, and then I'll flip it around and I'll close that little gap right there. I'm going to do the same thing with all 4 pieces, leaving this gap in the middle. This is not going to get sewn until the very end. So once I have all of my 1/4 inch sewing on here, as well as the other side and my 2 side panels, then I'm going to be ready to close that up. And in order to close that gap, all we're going to do is start and stop where we had started and stopped on this piece right here. So if my stitching went from here to here, my final stitching is going to close that gap, and it's going to be sewing through the outside, the end of the zipper tab, as well as the lining. And as I had mentioned earlier, literally happens every time, my lining is not as smooth as my outside. I think I concentrate so hard on making this a smooth curve and looking good that sometimes my lining suffers a little bit. If it's up here and it's a little puckery, it's kind of tucked into the top of the bag. And if it's down here in the bottom corners, it's so far away that no one is going to notice. So try to concentrate more on your outside and making those look great. Don't worry so much about the lining. So I'm gonna head over to the machine. I'm gonna sew all 4 of my side panels, leaving a gap. When I'm done, I'm gonna close that gap, sewing through all of my thick layers. I'll come back to show you how that looks before I turn it right side out. I did my stitching around all of the ends, and I have not sewn my center gap. I wanted to show you how that looks and also kind of touch base on what's happened up until this point. So as I had mentioned, I wanted to start sewing, if I could, as close to the zipper as I could. But again, because of my foot, I wasn't able to do that. So if you can see my beige thread right here and my black right here, I actually had to start about right here, just like I had thought. I stitched all the way around. I was fine on this side to get into that thicker part, but right here, my foot just couldn't back up far enough. So I flipped it over and I just sewed that little bit from the other side. So I sewed on this side and then I flipped it to the other side. I did that pretty much all the way around just because that was the only way to be able to get that foot in there. Now the only thing I have left are these little gaps right here. And so what I like to do is I kind of just pull my lining and my outside together like this. These are already sewn, so I'm just kind of pulling them down so they stay where I want them. And then what I'm gonna do is close up the gap. So I'm gonna start here and I'm gonna finish here. And I'm gonna go through all those layers. So I will add a clip right in the middle here. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on this side. So again, I like to pull my lining down, line those edges up, pull this side down, just like so. And now everything is kind of flat and easy to get a hold of. And I can finish up that gap. I'm gonna sew from this thread right over to this thread. Got all my stitching done. It's messy, but it is finished. I sewed that little gap up at the top here. Now you would definitely want to take your staples out. I am not doing that because I'm just kind of being lazy right now. So I'm gonna reach in here and turn my bag through the opening. I left my zipper open and I'm just gonna open that all the way. And I'm just gonna turn my bag gently. I did not do all this work to rip my bag. I'm just taking my time. All right, now I can smooth this out, check for any issues. Hopefully there are none that need to be fixed, but this is the time to do it. So, get this corner out. There we go. Just work my way around. I'm happy with those corners. I think they came out pretty smooth. No puckers, so that's a good thing. Come over here. All right. There's a teeny tiny little pucker right there, but you know what? I'm all right with it. It's actually on the back, and I should care, but it's so small that I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna poke out my top right here. All right, and do this side. There we go. All right. This was the moment where I realized in one of my bags that I had not anchored these D-rings down. That was a very sad moment. I fixed it. It was not easy, but I did fix it. All right, so now the only thing I have left to do, all my top stitching is done, is just to turn my edges under and close up my lining. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then my bag is all done. All right, I'm all closed up. I am just about done. Get my lining in there. Smooth that out. There we go. All right, finished. And I love it. I think it looks fantastic. I was debating on some different colors for zipper and hardware. I'm really glad I went with the brass and the natural zipper. I was not too sure what I wanted to do this morning, but it is perfect. So I've got my pockets on the outside, my D-rings for my adjustable handle. I've got my short handles. I like this 18-inch length. I think it's a really nice length for the bag. Inside, I have my divided pockets on the back here. Or actually, no, on the front, excuse me. Front where my handmade tag is. On the back, I have my zippered pocket. I am good to go. I think I might actually use this one. As much as I always make them for samples, this might be my new bag. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. I've got a couple of little threads here. Grab my lighter. Just kind of get rid of those. All right. Well, I think she's beautiful. I'm so excited. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you will make your own violet. Take on a little bit of a challenge. Give yourself something different to do besides a standard tote bag. Try something a little bit different, and I hope that you enjoy it. You can refer back to this video anytime that you need to. If you need cork or the pattern or anything else, you can find everything on my website right here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. I will add that down on the bottom too. If you like videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for joining me.